octobre, c'est pas terrible pour les gens de 50 ans.
Juste avec un petit peu les gamins quelque chose.
Voilà, le moulette peut-être.
Oh oui,
hein,
s'il te plaît.
Ouais, je pense que ce serait pas mal. Ouais, rien avant nous, c'était ouais, c'est toi. Tout le monde est un peu claqué. C'est ça qui est un peu. Cette année, c'est un peu chaud.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Isabelle Delas, CEO of LuxFlag. I'm very pleased to welcome you on our second day of the LSIW 2022. And I'm very pleased this morning to welcome different people. Stephane Badey, partner at Arendt Regulatory Consulting, Antoine Peter, and Valérian de Jamblinne de Meux, for a panel on demystifying the data need in the context of SFDR. What a title. I'm sure you are all curious to hear about it and to understand better if you will get out with all solutions regarding SFDR and which data should be available. So On a brief housekeeping notes for Q&A, if you are joining online, please use the chat function at the bottom right of your screen. For those with us in the room, we will have microphone. The recording of the session will be made available in a week or so on LuxLab YouTube channel. So please, the floor is you.
Thank you, Isabelle. I have to say it's probably the closest I've been to be in a movie, because I felt like I hope I haven't ruined the Lux flag ad being in the center of it. So a warm welcome to everyone on effectively demystifying the data need in the context of SFDR. I'm really delighted to bring that topic to you with my colleague, because data and the need of data has really been in the center and a long debated topic when we come to sustainable investment. But like many other aspects in sustainable investment, I think there's many layers, there's many aspects, there's many type of data, and this is what we are going to try to talk about, like to try to understand a bit what exactly is needed. If we look, so that's the agenda of today. I think we can move to the next slide, Valérian, thank you. Yeah. So if we look at the legislative initiatives or disclosure, taxonomy, MiFID II, IFMD, UCITS, NFRD, and CSRD, I think each of these initiatives will call for a set of data to be used as metrics, KPI, KRI, to measure either risk, performance, alignment to be reported to either investor or national competent authorities. So, already just from this, you could see that, there's many different data that potentially will be required. And today, obviously, in 40 minutes, we're not going to talk about everything. There are actually other sets of data around TCFD and, other standards where maybe other data would be required. But we're going to focus on SFDR and the taxonomy. As we are coming to the end of the period to prepare and submit the level 2 disclosure, and I don't know if you like us, but at the moment that's make a lot of our day. I think it was really important to start to think, or maybe we should already have think about the reporting obligations and what data are going to be needed. And the reason for that is because either the reporting period is going to be soon upon us, so potentially starting very soon after the date of January 2023, when the level 2 SFDR enter into force, or maybe because some of the gathering time have already started, and for example, which is the case for PAI. So, this is the time for looking at it, if you've not done so. And we're going to try with you to explore what are required under SFDR and taxonomy. So starting with you, Valérian, let's have a look on your SFDR. What are the data needs and how would you approach this?
Okay, does it work? Yeah. So, as you know, and as Stephane mentioned, the deadline for the level 2 disclosure to be made at pre-contractual level is the end of the year. For regulated funds, it needs to be filed at the end of this month, so next week. And for all these Article 8 and 9 products, market players will need to prepare a periodic reporting disclosure in a dedicated template. So all the information that will need to be provided will be provided directly within this template. And we see that there is a lot of misconception indeed on the data need, and we hear a lot of market players saying that they will not have the data, etc., etc. But if you look at the template, and this is what we will do today, effectively what you will need to report on is simply on the things that you commit to do. So now at pre-contractual level, you commit to do a lot of things, and here in this template, you will simply report on what you committed to do. So that's what I mentioned in terms of objective. You will report on what you committed to do. And for the deadline, any periodic reporting made as of 1st of January 2023 will need to include this dedicated template. So this will be once a year, and once a year you will need to recomplete this dedicated template. As you will see, we made a distinction here for each question if the information needed was qualitative or quantitative. For some, it's a mix. For some, it's one or the other, depending on what you committed to do. And we also made a distinction between prescriptive and non-prescriptive questions, because for some, it's very open, where you can pretty much do the form or use the format that you want. And for others, you are bound by the regulation because some specific elements are requested. So we won't go through every single question because some are very straightforward. It's the case, for instance, of the first question where you promote certain elements and you're simply requested to explain what was promoted and to provide a kind of a brief introduction on what was done. But we can jump directly on the second question, which is directly one of the most important questions of this template, and it's about sustainability indicators. So as a reminder for those who don't know, sustainability indicators, it refers to KPIs that market players will need to report on each year to showcase to their investors how well they did on their commitments. Market players are completely free on those KPIs, meaning that here the data shouldn't be an issue because you're supposed to use KPIs for which you already have the data. Otherwise, you wouldn't use them as KPIs. And to give you an example, for a very straightforward approach, most market players, they commit to exclude certain sectors. So if you commit to exclude certain sectors, a very standard KPI will be the share of your portfolio being exposed to the exclusion criteria. And so each year in this periodic reporting, you will simply report a 0%. But then you are free on those KPIs, so some market players decide to go a bit further. And a second KPI that is sometimes provided, and which we like, it's the share of your investment universe covered by these exclusion criteria. And this really allows market players to see the materiality of the approach. So it's not something required under SFDR, but as you all know here, the materiality of what you do is very important. And this is what the investor will look at, because it will really give them an idea of if what you promote effectively does something. So if the materiality of your approach is 0%, so if you have a long list of exclusion and then it doesn't exclude any company of your investment universe, then obviously you might be challenged at some point by your investors.
But so very important to say that on this one, for example, there's no need of external data. For the time being, it's just what you said you would do, and normally you can source the data in-house, or you should.
Does it work? Yeah, it works. I mean, there is need for external data if you sold to your investor that you would use external data. So let's say if you have a best-in-class approach and you say you're going to use MSCI rating and exclude below a certain rating, then you will need indeed this rating and you report on this rating. But the point is, there is no, you're not forced to use any external data, or there is no, prescription as to what provider you should use. So, whatever you sold to your investor in the prospectus, whatever you put in the pre-contractual disclosure, that's what you're going to report on here. And the name of the game is choose KPIs you have and that you're comfortable reporting on. And that's the exercise we've been doing with our clients for the last few months. And sometimes it's a discussion on how many indicators we should consider, because we have some asset managers that have very developed methodologies internally, and they will tell you, I'm looking at all this to measure how well I do and how I achieve my ESG commitments. And it's a list of 20 indicators, which I'm not sure we have to list 20 indicators here. If you have, I think the market practice is somewhere between 3 and 6 indicators. That's generally what we see, and that's sufficient to have a serious ESG strategy from a regulatory point of view and to have sufficiently detailed indicators. But then, even for identical strategies, you could have different indicators. So I think for energy transition funds, for example, some will look at CO2 avoided, others will look at the capacity of renewable energy that was financed or developed, others will look at square meter of solar panels. It's really about what do you have in your system, what is the data you have, and that makes sense to report and showcase that I sold you something, and this is how I did deliver on what I sold you.
Thank you, Antoine. So Valérian, back to the template.
Yes, so as I mentioned, we will not go through every single question and we'll focus on the most important one. And here we want to jump directly to the first question, which really needs the first question, which is prescriptive, and it's this question right here, which is about the consideration of principal adverse impact. So as you might be aware, the PAI, so those are the 60 indicators which are to be found in Annex 1 of the RTS. They may be used at various levels. And here, Antoine will speak about the first layer, the first level, which is the entity level consideration of PAIs. Then on the next slide, you will see the product level consideration of PAIs. And here it's the last level, which is the investment level consideration of PAIs when you commit to make sustainable investments. So we won't go through the entire definition of what is a sustainable investment, but under SFDR, if you want to make sustainable investment or if you want to qualify your investments as being sustainable, you need to go through a dedicated process. And the second step of this process is the DNSH test, so the Do Not Significant Harm test, which requires you to explain how the mandatory indicators from Table 1 have been taken into account. So here, market players are completely free on how they do it. So it can be quantitative.
For the moment.
For the moment. So for the moment, it can be quantitative or qualitative. Here, effectively, you will probably need data, although this can be very different from, so the need of data will be very different from one market player to another, because you have these indicators, but you're completely free on how you take them into account. So for some, it will be specific exclusions. So obviously, the data from third-party vendors are very handy there, but some market players adopt a more qualitative approach where they will make an assessment directly with available data. And in that regard, they might not need third-party vendors, but the reality of the market at the moment is that most market players will rely on data from third-party vendors for this specific question. Now, an important point to mention is that obviously everyone wants to make sustainable investment, but there is no requirement to make sustainable investments either, meaning that if you don't have the data, you can still opt for an Article 8 categorization, and then this question will not need to be completed.
And Valérian, when you say we'll use data vendor, what we mean is that today there are data vendors that actually report and provide PI at company level. Like that's the data they would provide you.
I mean, they need to take them into account, but they will not really provide the data. So we'll see in the different levels, which we will tackle 3 levels today. Here, you don't really provide data, so you don't provide the metrics which are linked to all the PAIs. So if you look at the first indicator, for instance, which is greenhouse gas emissions, you take them into account, but this can be done in various ways. So some market players, for instance, they will rely on third-party vendors, and they will define a specific threshold, and they will screen their investments against the specific threshold. But some other market players will simply screen out specific sectors, and in that regard, you don't necessarily need this information. And in this periodic template, you will effectively report on what you committed to do. So if you have a specific threshold, indeed, you need the information on greenhouse gas emissions. It's useful to have the information from third-party vendors, but this information is more and more made available by the companies themselves. So there is always a way to gather the information directly by yourself.
But yeah, it's part today of the standard offering of data providers. So PI reporting normally for listed equities, I mean, of course, listed equities, because if you are in alternatives, it's more difficult, but it's part of the basic data offering they have for you get the SFDR package, and what you will get is the PAI indicators for your investment universe.
Okay, so on the next slide, you can see again the principal adverse impact. Here, it's important to mention that you're free on the PIs that are taken into account, and the difference with the other is that in the other you were bound by a specific list of indicators that needed to be taken into account, but here market players are completely free on which they consider. And usually we see that market player they focus on 4 or 5 different indicators. And it's the same here. Effectively, you commit to take them into account the way you want, and then you will simply report on on the effect or on the result of the actions that you committed to do. So if it's based on exclusions, it will be the same. So if I go back on greenhouse gas emissions, if you mention at pre-contractual level that you consider greenhouse gas emissions, there is no way or there is no requirement to effectively report on the greenhouse gas emission of your portfolio. So if you say, I consider greenhouse gas emission by excluding specific sectors, then here you will simply report on the fact that in your portfolio, you didn't have any company which were linked or having ties with these specific sectors. So that's an important point because we see a lot of misconception with PI consideration, and Antoine will dig into the last level, for which there you really need to have the data and the specific metrics, so where it's a lot more prescriptive. But for the periodic reporting of your products, there is once again no need to have this specific data.
Yeah, it's all about what's use of the indicators we're talking about, the adverse impact indicators. But yeah, I mean, still, most likely you're going to be asked to do it quantitatively because someone contractually will ask it from you. You have to do it in the EET, but strictly speaking, in the level 2 template for periodic reporting under SFDR, you could get away without doing it quantitatively. But then there's a lot of other reasons and other uses that probably don't go in the same direction, but yeah.
And what we mentioned here, so even the example we gave are a lot focusing on quantitative elements, but some of you might have seen that it's also qualitative, because indeed some market players, they adopt a more, I'd say, a high-level approach where they will say that they consider PEIs as part of their investment process without providing too much information either. And here it's pretty much going to be the same, where the reporting will not tackle or will not focus too much on the PIs, and there they will not provide any specific data. But then indeed there will be an issue. There will be an issue with the EETs, but also with the MiFID ESG rules. So since August, product distributors need to consider the sustainability preferences of their investors, and the third bucket is about PI consideration. And if you're too high level, then your investors will have no understanding of what exactly you're doing. So even if, yes, you tick the box, you fit in under this third bucket, investors will not understand exactly what you're doing, and then effectively they might not invest in your product just because they don't really see the point, because there is no specific information provided.
Yeah, so that's one of the elements that Antoine mentions, where potentially, although there's no requirement for quantitative, you might turn to quantitative so that you're better understood and it fits the ET requirements. I know it's a lot of jargon, but I think it's an important one, because the two other elements for the MiFID rules are taxonomy alignment, which we all know is super low, and the other one is sustainable investment, which is there, but not in mass.
Next question, we won't expand too much. Here it's purely quantitative information, but this is information that you probably already have on your side, I hope. So it's just information on your investments. You will need to provide the 15 top investments, or less if it amounts to more than 50% of your net asset value. So here there is not much to say. It's quantitative, but this is information that you have.
And it's not ESG data.
Yeah,
that's just your portfolio.
So here, this one is actually one very important one, because we see that this is where most market players struggle. Where it's actually pretty easy. At pre-contractual level, you have a decision tree where you need to provide information on your asset allocation. It's a bit scary when you don't know the entire technical jargon, but it's actually pretty straightforward. So if we take the example of an Article 8 product, you will commit, or you will have committed to have a certain portion of your portfolio, or a minimum portion of your portfolio, which will be aligned with the characteristics promoted. And then you will have sub-buckets, for instance, for system investments. And even in the system investment bucket, you have 3 additional sub-buckets, which are the share of system investment aligned with the EU taxonomy, the share of system investment aligned with a social objective, and the share of system investment aligned with an environmental objective, so in line of the SFDR definition, so not aligned with the EU taxonomy. So on the paper, it sounds very scary, but when you get into it, it's actually not that hard. And here the idea is, once again, to provide this decision tree and to provide the share of your portfolio which fall under each bucket. It sounds ESG related, but it's not that much because it's more about your portfolio allocation, which is something you should have and monitor on a daily basis. I don't know if you want to add something.
Yeah, maybe just add again that there is no minimum. You know, it's again on reporting on whatever you put in your prospectus. So, if you said that 51% of the assets would respect the promoted characteristics, that's probably not very ambitious, but it's still very acceptable from a regulatory point of view. And so it's just about showing how 51% of the assets did indeed respect, you know, whatever ESG feature was promoted. So again, there is no minimum. It's not prescriptive. It's really about what you have in your system, what you have sold, and what you're doing with that respect.
It's transparency.
Yes. So it's true there is no minimum, but so
I mean, the template at pre-contractual level is about saying what you do, and then the reporting is about, you know, doing what you say.
So yeah. And just, we say there is no minimum, but don't commit on 10% of your portfolio and then say it's on Arendt's advice. So there is no minimum in the regulation, but if you commit to do not much on a small portion of your portfolio, then effectively you might not be challenged by the regulator, but there is high chances of being challenged by at least by your investors. So this slide, I won't dig into it now because we have dedicated slides for the EU taxonomy. So I leave that aside at the moment. And if we continue, this question on other, it's pretty much linked to what we said about the asset allocation. You can promote whatever you want on the portion of your portfolio you want, but you need to be transparent on what falls under other. So anything that is not aligned with the characteristics promoted. And you will need to provide this information. It's qualitative, it's non-prescriptive. Here it's again information that you should already have, and there is no specific need of data. I mean, yes, you need the data, but it's not data that needs to be fed by anyone because it's something that should already be monitored on a daily basis. So it will simply be reporting on things that you should have on an Excel sheet somewhere. And the last one of the template, it's a very important one and an interesting one. We see a lot of vendors, I'd say service providers, that tells you that they can do the periodic reporting for you. The thing is, in this template, as you have seen, there is a lot of qualitative information to provide. And the last question of this template requires you to provide information on the actions that have been taken during the reference period. And this question, only the investment teams or the ESG teams will be able to answer it. So here, you will really need to liaise internally and to see what has been done internally. For all the others, something can be put in place because effectively the information will be pretty much standardized over the years. But here it will really be a narrative explanation specific to the reference period. And this question is also a very good opportunity for you to explain to your investors if something went wrong over the reference period. So to me, this question is one of the most important one of the template where your investors will really see if you did something, if you had some ambitions, and if you really applied something. But it's also an important feature of this template is that you will need to liaise internally and to gather the data, or it's a qualitative data, but it's still something that needs to be discussed internally and which will not be able to be standardized or provided by the third-party vendor because only you knows what you did on your portfolio over the year.
Thank you, Valérian. So I appreciate that, at 9 o'clock in the morning, it's a bit of a hard sessions with all of these very specific slides and data. They will be available for you. But I think it was important to go in that level of details for everyone to understand that, again, so of course you need informations, you will need to report, but these informations, as you can see, a lot can be sourced actually in-house. A lot will be sourced from your own team. As Valérian mentioned, the last one is really like the ESG team or the deal team, what effectively they have done. And you will need external data, but that will depend, one, as Antoine mentioned, on your strategy, what exactly you've put in place, where there you might need the external data, and also potentially on the PI, where effectively, again, as Antoine mentioned, this is part of the package they sold. But a lot of the other informations will be sourced internally, and so everyone can work on it. There's no reason to be scared about.
All right, and now it's about to get worse. Having fun so far? Right, so far everything looks fairly accessible, right? I think we're trying to really convey the message that if you really look into the detail of the level 2 reporting obligation, you realize that a lot of it is actually achievable and there is no need to panic and buy every data sources you can get. It's probably now going more and more to be a different story when we talk about entity-level PIR reporting, and then I will talk about the taxonomy, and then everybody will leave the room because it's way too early for that. But maybe on PI at entity level, that's one of the reporting obligation under SFDR. So it's not product thing, it's an entity level thing. So you will report to the level of the asset manager, the level of the investment firm, etc. There it's a bit more prescriptive because you have a template again, and in this template you do have quantitative information to report. But here again, it's not only quantitative. And so again, if you simply rely on external providers, you will not be able to complete the template because there is some qualitative information in there on your engagement actions, on your description of your policies to identify a prioritized PAI. This is internal stuff. This is your internal processes and policies. So this is, internal qualitative data that, no one will be able to get for you. So you need to prepare for that and to realize that a lot of the qualitative information will come from you. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. But indeed, there is still a long list of quantitative indicators to report. But that's the one I think where we tried again to have a positive message and a hopeful message. We're saying that this is data which is more and more accessible. If you speak to data providers, they will more and more be able to give you the quantitative PAIs. This probably comes from the fact that this is really the list which is applicable to everyone. So, of course, there is an interest for them to be able to provide this data because this is indeed the part of ESG reporting that doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter what you sold to investors, everybody has to work with the same list. So, this is why I think there has been a lot of effort put in the industry to have this data available. So, yeah, here you cannot, you cannot go really around it. You have the quantitative, but again, you have the qualitative part. So here again, I think if you really look at the template and at the list, for each indicator, you still have qualitative information on the actions taken and action planned. You cannot buy that from any data provider. This is internal qualitative information you need to prepare. Now we can move ahead. So now we have 10 minutes left, if we want to have 10 minutes for questions, to go through the taxonomy, and just the first slide is a bit scary. So the taxonomy reporting, so now we're done with SFDR, so we have talked about product level reporting under SFDR, we've talked about entity level reporting under SFDR. Now we're going to talk about taxonomy reporting. And so the taxonomy is a whole different monster. Because the taxonomy is about, yes, sorry about the choice of words, but the taxonomy is indeed about, quantitative thresholds. It's about being very, very specific, very strict, and it's really opposed to SFDR, where you have a lot of flexibility, a lot of qualitative. That's not how the taxonomy works, and taxonomy is really black or white. It's very, very detailed, and to comply and show alignment with taxonomy, there you do need a lot of data. So I think very often when we say we don't have the data, we have a data issue, it's very much with the taxonomy that, it's very much the taxonomy we're talking about. And if some of you had time this weekend to read through the EU platform reporting on taxonomy usability and data, I didn't go through all of it yet.
There's 240 pages.
Yeah.
He's sending me this on a Friday night.
And you'll see that there is still a long way to go. But so what I propose for the next 10 minutes is to just briefly go through the reporting and the taxonomy and really how it works to identify a bit the data needs. So first thing, when we talk about the taxonomy reporting, it's very, very important to keep in mind or to really identify what we are talking about. And it's a bit the same for we had earlier the case of PIs. So everybody's talking about the PIs, but then effectively there are different use cases of the PIs. You have entity level reporting, product level reporting, or if you use them in the context of the NSH. 3 different use cases, 3 different set of rules, you're not doing the same things. Here, for the taxonomy, is the same. It's important to identify, am I talking about the product level reporting, which is at the bottom of the slide? So that's under Article 5 and 6 of the taxonomy. If you fall under Article 8 or 9 of the SFDR and you have environmental features, you have to calculate alignment. So that's product level, so that's the level of your fund, at the level of your mandate. This is product level taxonomy alignment calculation. But the taxonomy also applies directly to corporates. So that's the Article 8 of the taxonomy on top of the slide. This is about, I think the easiest to start with is non-financial company reporting. So this is about, I'd say, real-life corporates, and they calculate the taxonomy alignments. So it's about, Volkswagen, L'Oréal, whatever. They have to calculate and report their taxonomy alignments. But this also applies to some financial undertakings. So asset managers, banks, if they meet certain size requirements, they will have to report their taxonomy alignments, but not on the level of the product, but really at the level of their operations. So we're talking about all their lending portfolios. We're talking about the fees they generated, advising on taxonomy aligned products. So this is, again, I'm not talking about the product level alignment. It's really, as an asset manager, how much of my operation does align with the taxonomy. So that's a very, very important first differentiation, is to really, clearly identify what taxonomy reporting am I talking about. So, yeah, if we move on to the next slide. That's the product level reporting, which is probably the one everybody has more on their radar today, because this is the part that applies to a lot of financial products. So if you're 8 with environmental characteristics or 9, you will have to calculate alignment. So this is a lot of financial products. So that's the one everybody worries about, and it's also the one which is a bit difficult to do, because it's quite detailed. Here, the screenshots are from the periodic reporting, and you see that you have to report on all 3 KPIs of the taxonomy, so turnover, capex, opex. You have to make a split between enabling and transitional activities. Then it's going to become even worse because you have to report on how much is in nuclear and fossil fuels. So it's quite detailed, it's quite difficult to do. Why? Because there is a big sequencing issue, which is that we are today asking financial products to report on their level of alignment. So that's the thing you have here on the slide. While if we move to the next slide, we see that underlying corporates, or so the companies that we are investing in with our financial products, are not yet reporting on their taxonomy alignments. So that's why the industry is struggling so much today, is because we are asking financial products to say how much they align, when the companies they have in portfolio do not yet report on how much they align, or they do not yet have to report on how much they align. As you can see on the slide, for non-financial corporations, they will have to report alignment only as of next year. So that's today we're asking financial products to say how much they align when what they have in the portfolio do not yet say it. So today it is very difficult. But again, I think we're trying to convey a hopeful message here, that once underlying corporates start to report on it, it will become much more easier for financial products, because you will just do a weighted average of the taxonomy alignment of your portfolio constituents. Of course, with all the caveats that, this is only large listed companies for the moment. We're trying to extend the scope, etc., etc. It's only European companies.
Just as a positive note, so since there is a lack of data at the moment, most market players, they kind of opt out. You cannot really opt out because you still need to report, but there is no need to commit towards the EU taxonomy at the moment. And actually very, very few market players committed towards the EU taxonomy. And as of today, any commitment made would be considered as ambitious. So we do see some market players committing to 1 or 2%. We'll give you some data a bit later on the percentage of companies that already reported on the EU taxonomy. But even 1 or 2% today would be considered as ambitious. So even if you have 0% today, it's really not an issue, and it would be standard.
And it's today not an issue either for distribution purposes, because the reality is that in your in your prospectus, when you put forward the taxonomy alignment, it is a message on how ambitious you are on the topic, of course, but it's also a very important element for the distribution of your product, because potentially you tick one of the boxes under MiFID when you target retail investors. But today, does anyone really go to their banker and say, I want taxonomy-aligned investments? I think we're in the industry and we barely know what taxonomy is and how it works. So, imagine the, everyday retail clients. It's not like they're walking and say, I want taxonomy-aligned products. So I'm not sure this has a negative impact on distribution on this side. And if you target institutional clients, today the discussion is still very much focused on, do you have an Article 8 or an Article 9? And there is not so much attention put to taxonomy alignment. Potentially this will change because institutional investors will have financial incentives in being taxonomy aligned. They will have to report their own taxonomy alignment. So again, remember Article 8, pension funds have to report their taxonomy alignment, banks have to report their green asset ratio. So when they start to have to do this and they see that the competitor has a higher green asset ratio, then they will be more interested in investing in financial products that are taxonomy aligned. But I don't think we're there yet. So today, if in your prospectus you have very low 0% taxonomy alignment, you're still going to successfully fundraise in Europe. So there's not so much incentive, I guess, today to put this. Right, so still on the company reporting, because we're trying to show what is quantitative, what is prescriptive, non-financial corporates will have a template. So the same way we have a template for financial products to report on taxonomy alignment, every company, large listed company in Europe will have to produce this type of template as of their annual report of next year. And there it will be very easy to see, depending on the environmental objective of the taxonomy, the economic activity there follow, how much is eligible, how much is aligned, and at the end you have an overall alignment based on turnover, capex and opex. This will be in the annual report of large listed company in Europe in June next year. So if you have a European listed equity portfolio, then it will be, it should be much easier to have taxonomy alignment because you will get it from underlying companies. And then when this happens, as was just to show a bit the value chain. So on the top left corner, you have large listed or corporates subject to NFRD today and tomorrow CSRD that report on their taxonomy alignment based on turnover, capex, opex. And then this feeds into the reporting of banks that can calculate the green asset ratio. This is why, if you remember the earlier slide, banks and other financial undertakings, they start reporting alignments only in 2024. So they have 1 year of delay. The sequencing was, thought well there, but it was not thought well for financial products, I think, if I may. And this is just illustrating at portfolio level, so at the level of financial products, once you have the alignment of the underlying constituents, then it's just a weighted average at the level of your portfolio.
So it sounds scary, but it's easy.
I mean, it's again, I think we're trying to convey a hopeful message, although this is very technical and heavy for the morning. But I think today it's mostly a sequencing issue. But it's not easy in the sense that if you really look at the criteria of the taxonomy, I don't know if some of you already have so much time on your hands that you had to waste on this, but if you go in the taxonomy compass, if you look at the technical screening criteria, you'll see that it's pages and pages of highly technical criteria. But when I say highly technical, it's really engineering stuff. And it's really making reference to regulation and laws in the EU that we in the financial sector have absolutely, we have no idea what they're talking about. It's about the use of hazardous substance in manufacture of batteries. I have no idea what we're talking about here. It's about the criteria for sustainable forest management. Again, I have no idea what we're talking about here. But underlying companies that are active in those sectors, they know what we're talking about here because they have to comply with European regulation as well if they want to run their operations in the EU. They are familiar with those engineering standards. So for them, it's not easy, but if someone can do it, it's them. They can test and assess if really their operations respect the engineering criteria of the taxonomy, and then they just give you the percentage of alignments.
Thank you, Antoine. I'm conscious of the time. So, on the taxonomy reporting, the way we could sum up this is like highly prescriptive, quite a lot of data to be collected. Will get better after 2024, but will get better for European company only and listed entities and some of the smaller entities that will be captured by CSRD. Yeah. But if you have a broader non-European portfolio investing, for example, US company, still quite a headache. I know we're trying to bring a positive message, but still quite a headache in terms of calculating taxonomy alignment for non-European company.
Yeah, I think that's what Valérian will show in this slide, but again, we try to convey a hopeful message. Today, there is, and that's what the report of the EU platform shows, there are already a few companies that voluntarily report on taxonomy alignment, and that includes non-EU companies. So you already have US companies, you already have Asian companies that report on taxonomy alignment. Again, I think for European companies that are not obliged to do it, so if you're an SME today in Europe, if you're looking for money, if you're looking for capital, you're going to find capital quicker and cheaper if you can show taxonomy alignment. So there is a strategical advantage today in going through this painful exercise and trying to show if you can, evidence some taxonomy alignment.
Yeah. So yeah, to conclude, and it's pretty much everything pretty much has already been said, but I think yet another positive note, and I think this is, I hope you understood that, is that indeed the data is not available at the moment, but you don't need to be expert in the EU taxonomy because the company themselves will start to report on their level of alignment, and then data providers will also start to find the data. But on that point, this is actually something we wanted to mention because this is also a misconception that we see. As of today, several data vendors, they sell not alignment with the EU taxonomy, but either eligibility or a maximum share of alignment with the EU taxonomy. But what we see is that these data providers, usually they have their own methodology, and what they give you is an estimation of what potentially of your potential alignment with the EU taxonomy, but not the effective alignment. And as I hope you understood right now, is that everything is very technical, very specific, and this estimated alignment will not work, and this is why, once again, there is very few market players that committed towards the EU taxonomy at the moment.
I think we insist on that because we come from a law firm, and the ESAs have insisted on the fact that you should not use estimate, and it has been flagged by some regulators, including the IMF, for example. They're very, very strict on that. If you provide the taxonomy alignment, it's not based on estimates. I think in France they give you the opportunity where you would say, considering the state of the data, the maximum I can calculate is 0%. However, using estimates, I think that I might be there. You have a specific sentence you need to use, but it's very, very important to differentiate estimates and the real taxonomy alignment.
And the last point, which is also important to differentiate, it's the difference between eligibility and alignment. So when we speak about eligibility, it simply means that the company is covered by the EU taxonomy. So it contributes, or it doesn't even, it contributes to one of the economic activities, or it's one of the economic activities covered by the EU taxonomy, but it doesn't mean that they contribute substantially in line with the technical screening criteria, or that they comply with the DNSH test. Because here, for instance, if you look at what some data vendors are doing for the DNSH test, they will have a controversy test based, for instance, on the UNGC and the OECD guidelines. That's fine, but that's only one part of the equation, and that's not sufficient. So based on that, they will say, okay, we assume this might be aligned, but they will only be eligible, but they will not be aligned. And if you look here at the table on the right-hand side, you can see that there is first of all, two things to see, is that very few companies provide that level of alignment. And even in terms of eligibility, it's rather light at the moment, and the data is rather recent. And then there is a big gap between alignment and eligibility, where if you look at turnover, for instance, you have around 300 companies that reported on the eligible turnover %, but in terms of alignment, it's only 59 companies, so it's very few.
And all of this is being refined now. It's the early days for the taxonomy. A lot of those issues have been identified, and we're trying to find solutions. But I think here we have highlighted a few attention points that already today, if you really pay attention to that, you can avoid a lot of missteps. For eligibility, for example, if you take a real estate fund, there are high chances it's going to be fully eligible. Does it mean it's going to be fully aligned? Not necessarily. And so it could be a very misleading figure. Car manufacturers also, they tend to show themselves as 95% eligible, but then you only have 8% of alignment. So it's two very different figures.
Yeah, I think the taxonomy is clearly one of these objectives where we say sustainability is a journey. I think taxonomy is a journey, and we are at the beginning of that journey. I think there's a big political push behind, so we will get there, and we will see taxonomy alignment, because I think this is what Europe wants. But I think, as we've shown today, it's probably early days, and if you want to jump in, you better be super prepared. I think we have the 5 minutes for the questions, so exactly. We are in time, which is rare for us.
Thank you very much. Any question from our audience? Yes.
Thank you. One question about the taxonomy product reporting. We have been hearing a lot of different points of view about the fact that we need to report on the taxonomy when you have no commitment at pre-contractual level, but you do have environmental characteristic. What is your point of view on that? Because I still don't have the answer.
Yeah, should I take it? No, yeah, indeed, you should report on it if you have an Article 8 with promoting environmental characteristics. I agree that this is not, I see why, where this is coming from, the confusion. But again, I invite you to read the report of the EU platform, and they make it very clear in various occasions that, if you're an 8 with environmental features, you have to report alignment. And it's really, the taxonomy is a screen. It's a tool, you use it, you screen against the tool, and then you report on how much you align. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
I think they refer to the greenness of your portfolio. That's how they call it. So even as a standard Article 8 product, if you do not commit, they want you to showcase the greenness of your portfolio.
Yeah, maybe what I wanted to add is that we don't know that yet, but at least from the discussion we have with a few of our clients and thinking about how difficult that is, and potentially the investment in terms of internal processes, getting the data, etc., maybe there will be a case where, a bit the same way we're doing for the pre-contractual today, where we say, based on the data I have, I cannot tell you more than 0%. Maybe there is also an opportunity to do that in the periodic reporting. If you're on an 8 standard, then it's too costly, you cannot do it. You're just going to report 0% alignment as well. You say, based on the data that was available, that was accessible to me, I could not calculate more than 0%, which would be a way of sort of getting out of it without calculating it.
Any other question? Yeah.
Thank you, Isabelle. Ahmed Oumara from LuxFlag. Quick question, because you've mentioned data availability, data quality, potentially that require a bit more time to be completely in place. You've also mentioned that it's still acceptable to report 0% alignment with the taxonomy. A bit more practical, how long do you expect this sort of transition phase to last? If you consider that for now, it's not a problem for investors to select funds that have 0% alignment, and overall the signal that it's sending to the overall market.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I think if you ask the three of us, we may have a different answer. I'm going to tell you as the old guy on the panel. For now, I think what we're saying to clients is that if I was a bank today, I would actually train my salespeople to work a lot around a language or a sales speech around PIE considerations. Because for me, if I'm looking at what I have available today, that's my best way out in terms of your MiFID compliance and the sustainability test. because we see that sustainable investments, Article 9 type of funds are still pretty low, and taxonomy alignment, that's non-existent almost, and it's not going to get better before, again, 2024. Yes, firms will start to report. Yes, we will have but is that going to be enough for a bank to actually have a range of products that it can package and sell to their investors? Probably not. And I think, as Antoine mentioned, I think your funds or financial products, at least for my generations, they are sold more than bought. So I'm not waking up in the morning and say, oh, I'm going to buy a taxonomy aligned fund today. No, I'm going to the bank and they offer me their selection. And I think if you work today on PI considerations, you can go through the first 2 years, and then after that, you'll expand on your portfolio. But I think my colleagues have different view.
Maybe I give my, yeah. I mean, then I know what Stephane will tell me in the, on the tram on the way back. But to me, I think you should already today start thinking about a serious plan on how you're going to handle the taxonomy, because I think it's really going to be the one strategic feature of the whole framework. If you look at what's coming, there will be. So the taxonomy in itself is a tool. It's a transparency tool. You don't have to be taxonomy aligned. You don't have to make taxonomy aligned investments. But around the taxonomy and everywhere, in Europe, we are talking and starting to think about incentives to, redirect capital flows towards sustainable investment, which is the first objective of the action plan, is redirect capital flows. How are we going to do that? We're going to give banks financial incentives, reduce capital requirements if the products or the investments or, the lending books are taxonomy aligned. We're going to design things like the EU Eco Label, the EU Green Bond Standards, where what matters is taxonomy alignment. We're going to have maybe things like in Luxembourg, where you have a reduced subscription tax, depending on how much taxonomy aligned you are. All of these, they don't care if you're 8 or 9. They don't care if you're making sustainable investment. The one metric that matters is your taxonomy alignment. So strategically, I think this will be, it will become, and if you ask about the time frame, I mean, I'm hopeful that it will be within the next 2-3 years. I think, Stephane is saying it's going to take longer, but we'll see. I mean, there are still a lot of limitation in the tool. Non-EU company, some of the criteria just don't make sense. If we advise a few forestry funds, and they tell me, look, Antoine, what is in the taxonomy just doesn't work in real life. Like, no one's doing that in real life. It doesn't work. So there is still a lot of work, and you need, whenever someone shows you a taxonomy alignment percentage, you need to really, or this person needs to be able to explain, there are limitations in the tool. If we advise a sustainable agricultural fund, that's not taxonomy aligned because it's not eligible. The activity is not in the taxonomy. So it's still today an incomplete indicator, I would say, but likely to become strategic in the next, hopefully, 3 years.
Thank you. Thank you to our excellent speakers. So let's meet again maybe in a shorter time next year to see how many companies have been taxonomy aligned. Thank you. So the next session is will start at 10. It will be on deconstructing and reconstructing ESG by Banque de Luxembourg. So also quite a hot topic. Thank you to all. Thank you to the audience.